Hello to you wherever you might be in the world. I'm so glad that you have joined us today for this inspirational conversation on mobilizing volunteers to come alongside families as they prepare to come back to church. If you've joined us for an online event before, I just want to say welcome back. And if this is your first time, welcome to the family. If I've never had the privilege of meeting you, my name is Melanie Hester, and I just want to introduce myself. I have the privilege of serving here on staff at Awana, but I'm also a child disciple maker. I serve in the 4s and 5s and kinder classroom at my church, in addition to raising my beautiful kids alongside my best friend, Drew. I'm here today, as you can see, with my friend and coworker, Ross Cochran. So if you're already in the chat and saying, hey, just shoot a hey to Ross. Ross is going to be moderating our roundtable discussion today. But some of you may not have ever met him before. So Ross, would you introduce yourself?
Oh, absolutely, Melanie. It's great to be with you. And I mean that quite literally. It's great to be with you. Everyone say hi to Melanie over there. This is what a high production event looks like during COVID, but I am so glad to be here. My duties with Awana usually focus on the Resilient Disciples podcast, which is available wherever you get your podcasts. And I promise that's the last time I will shamelessly plug what I do here. But I live out in the burbs here with my wife, Lauren, as well as my 2 kids, Abigail and Isaac. We are in the process of looking for our first home. So if you know a realtor who is selling, let them know that they should sell because we need that inventory. And we are foster parents and just really excited about being able to be with you all today for what I think is a really critical conversation at a really crucial moment as we look forward to the future and what is hopefully going to be a year like no other after a year like no other in a totally different way.
Oh man, it's so true, Ross. And so I really want to get to that conversation. But before we get there, let's just do a couple of things to make sure that you are ready for this conversation. The first is that you are part of the chat. All right. And so if you look down towards the bottom of your Zoom screen, you're going to see this button that says chat. Thank you, Zoom, for making it so blatantly obvious on how to talk to each other. If you click on that button that says chat, some of you have already found that you're going to be able to introduce yourself, potentially encourage and meet other volunteers and leaders that are gathered with us today, and just really connect on things that you hear today that are really meaningful to you. So we're going to stop for just a second. And if you have not introduced yourself and shared where you're from, we'd love to see that in the chat. We want to connect you with each other. And this is the place to do that. The next way that you can communicate is you can also send a message to us, the panelists and hosts of this online event. And so when you go in there, you can actually change who the message goes to just panelist and host. If you do that, that's a direct way for you to connect with us to ask questions that you might have as we continue on in this conversation. And then lastly, we are hoping to have a little bit of time at the end of our roundtable discussion where we have gathered questions that you guys have had throughout the conversation, and we are able to help give those to our panelists so that they can answer those for you. But in order for us to be able to do that, you'll see kind of on the opposite side, there's a little piece that might be like, that says Q&A. Again, thank you, Zoom, for making it so blatantly obvious of what it looks like to ask a question. Click on that, and that question will go direct to us. We will mark that as a question that you submitted, and we will get that to our team so that they can answer those at the end of their conversation. But Ross, I want you to go ahead and get this started. I'm going to let you introduce the speakers because I want to go hang out in the chat and connect with the leaders who are here. So I will be back with Matt Markins at the end of this conversation to really give you guys a deep look into what the Child Discipleship Forum is and why we have saved a seat at that table for you. So until then, I'll see you in the chat.
Well, thank you very much, Melanie. Let's jump in. So first, I want to say welcome to Matt Markins. Matt is the President and Chief Strategy Officer at Awana. He and his wife, Katie, are lifelong children's ministry advocates. They pull for the Tennessee Titans and have 2 teenage sons. Matt, I'm so glad you're here. And as a long-suffering Chicago Bears fan, as much as I can be invested in football, I'll pull for the Titans too. So welcome.
With you, Ross.
We also have Cynthia Dixon. Cynthia has advocated for the lives of children and youth, discipled them for more than 20 years. Currently, she serves as the Children's Ministry Director at Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship Church in Dallas, under the leadership of Dr. Tony Evans. Cynthia, I had the privilege on the Resilient Disciples podcast of speaking to two of your Awana leaders, Tara Youngblood and Catherine Tucker. So I am already a huge fan of your ministry, and I'm really glad to have you here as part of this conversation.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you.
And we also have Sam Luce. Sam has served in multiple roles at the same church for over the past 23 years, including 16 years in children's ministry. Sam currently serves as the pastor of families, overseeing the kids and youth team at Redeemer Church and Ministries, a multi-site church in upstate New York. Sam, I have family in upstate New York. Your community is a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
Really glad you're with us.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here.
And last but certainly not least, we have Esther Moreno. Esther, you has dedicated her life to reaching the next generation for Christ. With over 15 years of children's ministry experience across various churches and denominations, she has focused her efforts on effectively capturing the hearts and minds of children with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Esther, you run Child's Heart Ministries, which allows you to serve churches across the country. So I'm really eager to hear your perspective today. Welcome.
We're excited to be here.
Now, Melanie has shared, we're just really glad to be able to gather this community together today. But I think it would be bad form if I didn't just start by acknowledging that it's been a really hard year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily know your context. I'm certainly not an epidemiologist, but I am sure that your community has been affected by the coronavirus pandemic, and what your ministry has looked like has been drastically changed this year. So I actually want to start by just acknowledging how hard of a year it has been. Hopefully this conversation helps inspire and motivate as we look to a new year. But Matt, I want to start things with you. I'll ask the question this way, Matt. What's keeping you up at night? When you look at the world of Kidman right now, what are you personally struggling with? And what are you hearing that others who are probably on this call with us today are also struggling with?
It's a great question, Ross, and I want to join you and just say this is an amazing group of panelists, and those of you who are chatting online, we're so grateful to be with you. And I feel like a lot of us could jump in and have that conversation, so I'm eager to see what people put in the chat here. But what's keeping me up at night, Ross, are two conversations I had with a couple of pastors about a month ago. And I just want to kind of walk through those stories. The first one was a pastor on the West Coast. We were talking about the challenges, as you just mentioned, the challenges of this past year. And this pastor said, Matt, as I look to the months ahead, he said, I think the key word is rebuild. He said, where we are on the West Coast, he said, I don't even know who our church is anymore. Like, I don't know who's with us. He said, some of our people, because they're more restricted in where they live, some of our people have gone to other churches. And through the digital engagement, it's difficult to see who's tuning in. And when we email and text out, not everyone responds. So he said, I've been a pastor for 25 years, and I've never experienced a time when I don't even know who's with us, who is my church. So he said, as we think about going into the fall, we're thinking now our mentality is rebuild. So I think that's a key word. And what's interesting is I heard that exact same word from another kids pastor in the Midwest. And she said that same word, rebuild. She said, Matt, we have 900 kids in the midweek space and about 1,500 on the weekend. And she said, Matt, we're sold out to children's ministry and child discipleship. She said, not to brag, but we're good at what we do. We know how to do this, and we do it because of the gospel. We want to disciple kids. But Ross, she said, even we've gotten lazy. She said, we've kind of downshifted during COVID. We've kind of relaxed some things. And so for us to get ready for the fall, we're going to have to push this thing uphill really hard to get ready for the fall. But here's what concerned me. She said, Matt, think about the churches that are not as focused on mission as we are.
Sure.
She said, I'm concerned if they don't start in March and April to get their volunteer base mobilized, churches are not going to be ready for the fall. We have to start rebuilding now. And that's what's keeping us up at night.
Yeah. I mean, that word, it speaks to urgency that the rebuilding now. But I think inherently there's hope. Esther, I want to bring you in here because I think like I mentioned in the introduction, your perspective as kind of this wide lens on the church. Are you seeing a similar conversation happening in churches right now? What do you feel like is keeping the churches you're connected to up
I mean,
at night?
absolutely, Matt. I mean, everything that you said, I definitely agree that we are in a season of rebuild. We just had a leadership team meeting recently, and our children's pastor, I mean, the first thing he said, he apologized to us, and he said, oh my goodness, the season has been crazy. And it has kind of been a sabbatical for a lot of us, especially for those churches that are still not operating yet, and they're still definitely virtual. But I remember him admitting this, and I'm like, look, we have all been on a sabbatical in this season. It is not only your fault, but I mean, I think also navigating through that and the fact that we are still living through a pandemic. Just on Sunday, the denomination that I am a part of, Church of God, I'm a part of a beautiful church. We just lost a huge spiritual giant in the denomination through COVID, unexpectedly. So dealing with the idea of what can we do to rebuild while still navigating through the pain that we are still in a pandemic, that so many churches are on different levels. Some are open, some aren't open, and learning how to navigate through that season, I think, is definitely something that is keeping us all up at night on how do you reach everyone, because we're all at different phases in our life. We're all in different phases of this pandemic and learning how to do that.
Absolutely. We'll bring this to everybody here. So Sam and Cynthia, we can start with you. Your church context might be further ahead as far as reopening than some of the people on this call. Like, as you've been trying to navigate what this looks like in the context of your community specifically, what have been some pain points? What have been some things that worked a certain way or totally were not what you were expecting? We talked about engagement online being so different. What does it look like to engage kind of in person, but also having to sort of do that dance Esther is speaking to?
Well, Ross, for us, I look at it from a different lens.
Okay.
I didn't look at it from a lens of, oh my gosh, what do we do? I looked at it from a lens of, oh my gosh, this is an opportunity for us to revamp, reset, redo everything. So I went to my team like that. So though this happened through this period of time, I said, God has given us an opportunity to reset. And so all the many things that we wanted to do, could have done, try to propose, this was the time where everything shifted, downscaled. And this is an opportunity for leadership to really listen to us at this point, for children's ministry people, workers. And so I took the time out to come up with a plan of everything for post-COVID, because again, we're not going to always be in COVID or this pandemic. So I couldn't keep us in that mindset. And so oftentimes as leaders, as we continue to keep us in that mindset. So my mindset from day one is to move from that mindset. What is the goal for post-COVID? So I started out with a plan. And so I orchestrated a plan of action during this period of time while we're out training. This was an opportunity. So all those times when we couldn't get volunteers or leaders to come in for our trainings, in person, well, they would come for Zoom. And so my numbers for training went up versus going down. And so training was a part of it, restructuring the environment, making it more of a learning environment, new furniture, new everything. It was an opportunity for us to say, okay, because me as a director at Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship, I'm constantly spinning, I'm constantly moving. And I didn't have the time because, we got the kids with the runny nose, we got the parents, the chicken, we got all kinds of things going on. And I didn't have the opportunity to cast vision like I needed to do. And so this was my time to stop, cast vision, and move to the next level. Because sometimes I believe God in our lives often allow things to happen so that you can do a reset. And so some of the things, yes, my team was wonderful. We moved straight into virtual Zoom. I mean, it wasn't like, let's rethink about it, let's train about it. It's automatically, let's do. So in the meantime, while we're working on our post COVID plan, we have this platform of Zoom. It worked for us. It actually worked because not only did we have our kids, we had kids all across the country because we did set it up where online it didn't matter what church you were from. You can come into our Zoom and be a part. So no one was missing out on ministry opportunities. So we did that for our Awana program. We did that for our Sunday service, for our small groups. And so for that, I had one team working on that and another team working on our plan of action of posts. So for me, those people who I didn't think that would come back for in-person, this is an opportunity for them to still serve in ministry because they won't come back. They're not going to come back, but I'm still going to offer my virtual platform even once we go back in person. So I'm not losing. I actually have two platforms going on at the same time. And so every volunteer is not meant to be in the classroom, but some volunteers are meant to be tech people. And so that's what we were doing in this time. So I look to leaders, I talk to them and say, let's not look at the negative. Oh my God, this happened. Let's find the positive, how we can move forward in this. And what is God is really saying to us in this moment? Is he saying this is an opportunity to make it better? Or is this the opportunity to, oh, I don't have enough volunteers. I don't have enough people. The people are laxing. No, there are going to be some people who are going to leave. And Ross, you have to stop me talking from any time because Matt knows I'll keep talking.
No,
And
Cynthia, I
keep
want you to
talking.
say it louder for the people in the back. This is beautiful.
But this is the opportunity. Yes, let's understand this. People are going to fall away. That's going to happen. That's just the nature of the beast. But in the same token, let's look at the people this is the opportunity for them to come in. I did have some people who said that they had served in ministry 20, 25 years, and they were obligated to continue, but they wanted to move forward. Well, this was their time, their moment where they could shift out, no problem, no guilt, and move to the next level of their journey. Everybody's not meant to be a part of that journey the whole time. So I think we have to start thinking about it as leaders to stop saying that, yes, I don't have enough volunteers, but don't guilt the ones that you have there that wants to move to the next level of their lives. Because God will give a vision. Though he give a vision, he gives a provision to the vision. And so he will give other people. So the thing about it is maybe we need to change our prayer thought to that and say, God, what do you see for us to do in this moment? And and send the people you want for this particular moment? Because everyone who did the moment before may not be for this season now.
Yeah.
But again, stop me from talking.
No, Cynthia, look, I love that because I think what I hear in that too, in that just that change of perspective is it's not about dismissing what people are feeling, not about dismissing those who, on a personal level, may be more, have more fear about the virus or not be willing to do things like come back into the classroom. You can embrace that and you can move forward at the same time. And on top of that, what you're talking about, you're talking about having two different teams managing these two different platforms. That may not make sense to every ministry that's represented by those here, but those principles do. You can do the things that you're talking about no matter what your ministry looks like or what your context looks like. Exactly. But, and there's so much activity happening in the chat. I think I may have missed it, but Matt, I think I saw you say, like, reset so you can rebuild. And Sam, I want to bring you in on that front, because I think to even expand the lens like even a little bit further around coronavirus, like coronavirus has also revealed some weak points in our discipleship. How do you feel like COVID has revealed those weak points, and how can we leverage this new season, like Cynthia's talking about, to strengthen those areas where discipleship may not have been the first priority?
Yeah, I think there's been so much difficulty in COVID. I mean, just across the board. I think leading in this season has probably been the single hardest season to lead in my life. And being here in 25 years, it's to lead in this season is there's no simple decision. Every decision has a potential to upset someone or not upset someone else. Either you're taking it too seriously, you're not taking it seriously enough. And so just the mental difficulty of trying to go forward and disciple people and a minister in a context which none of us have ever been in before is incredibly difficult. I think the thing the biggest thing this has revealed to us, honestly, is the lack of discipleship. Like when you say, like when I hear Matt say he's talking to these pastors saying, we don't know who's with us. To me, I mean, I don't know who that is. I'm just saying, I'm including my church. I'm not picking on that guy, but I'm just saying this is revealed to us that the church is more than than just attendance. It's more than just coming up and showing up to an event. It's us living life together, life on life. There has to be this idea of where we know who our neighbor is. There's this idea that we, I think for so long the church has measured bigness and how many people come, and I think we have to like relook at what our measurements are, to say like how many disciples are actually discipling other disciples. Like, I think we have to change the way our measurement is. I think we have to change the way we equip people, the way we equip family. Like, so even, I think this is a great time even to reset, even the conversation for the last 10 years at least has been about, children, parents are the primary disciplers of their kids. Right. And, but when you would talk to people, when they say that, you say, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? And you say, well, they're the primary disciplers of their kids. How does that work out? What do you do? And like, well, we want the parents to be doing that. And it's like, well, how do you help them to do that? And because I legitimately want to know, because I want to do that. And I'm not, I don't always know the right thing to do. And so I think one of the things this has forced us to do is to say, okay, the kids no longer come to church with their families, right? They're at home with their parents. How are we going to help them? And I think it's forced us to look like, okay, how are we going to lead today? How are we going to lead, like, even like Cynthia's saying, like how it's forced us to have that freedom to breathe a little bit, to say, okay, we need to prepare to reopen in November, but we also need to be prepared to close in December and January and February and March. So we have to say like, okay, this is a new reality that we have to wrestle with, to say, how can we lead? And so for us, like one of the things that we've been doing is we've been going more old school. We've been going more old school. We've been sending letters to kids. We've been trying to do things that we used to do that helped us, that we forget about, because you get so caught up in the day-to-day, like Cynthia's saying, like it's so busy. There's so many things happening. You got so many plates going. You're just trying to survive Sunday, rather than saying, how can we invest our time and our energy, our efforts and everything into creating disciples that disciple people, right? And part of the problem is, I think, is with parents, is that I think we have to be better disciplers of parents, better disciples of our volunteer team, better disciples of our staff, in such a way that they understand not just how do I pull off an event, but how do I do that in such a way that I model to my kids I teach, the teachers I'm in charge of, like the beauty of Christ. How do we make Jesus look beautiful to those who we're leading, rather than just try to just pass information to them? It's not information transfer we don't want. You know what I'm saying? It's not just that.
Sam, can I add
incarnation?
On that?
You know what I mean?
I love everything that Sam is saying, and I'm looking at the chat box at the same time, and a lot of us are talking about, I know Tony in particular, he talked about that concern, about digital technology, because we have all been kind of forced out of nowhere to shift to a different method. And I think in this season, we have to be so careful, because spirituality can be threatened by digital technology. But at the same time, I'm a firm believer that we still need to embrace digital technology. Virtual out of nowhere has become more important than actually being in the building. And I know that's so hard for so many of us to say, because we're so attached to the building, but it has become so important. But I think what has happened in the process, even though we're kind of lost in who are we reaching, are we reaching enough people? I think we've found out that we're actually reaching more people. We're reaching people who were not coming into the church building. So I think it's so important that we realize that, and that this season also forced us to go where the digital natives that we reached, they were already there. But I think that this season definitely forced us to go there. But something that I've noticed is that it has required us to go forth in a spirit of excellence like never before, especially in children's ministry. I think that we have definitely hurt ourselves when we don't have, and I know it sounds crazy, but when we don't have good cameras and good lighting, like that has become the new thing that is important now in this new season that we have navigated into. And I know people say, I have a good heart and that's the only thing that matters. That's not the only thing that matters.
Right. Yeah.
Our competition is so fierce out there. We got Disney, okay? We got Nickelodeon, we got streaming. So many things are out there and they're competing for our kids' attention. So lighting does matter now. Camera does matter now. These are the things for progressive children's ministry leaders, those who are really passionate about reaching the next generation. These are things that we have to invest in and that we have to care, but we also need to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to promote that personal walk with God, that time in God's word. So it's so many things. I saw that in the chat. People were talking about how can we, be careful because digital technology is kind of taking over. God is still faithful. He is still real. He's still on the throne. That we still have to do what we can to make sure that we stay connected with him and glorify him, maybe through a different format as well.
Amen to that.
Ross?
Yeah, go ahead,
So-
Cynthia.
Going with Sam, agreeing with Sam and Esther, but agreeing with Sam when he said that, how you can be ready for in person and then in December out, maybe back virtual back and forth. And someone said in the chat that maybe if you continue with virtual, you'll lose a lot of people coming in person. If you make your in-person service so live and interactive, you probably won't lose those people, but you have to understand that you have to allow them to be cautious. You have to allow those feelings that it may take them a moment to come back, but you have to also provide a platform both ways. That's what's missing in the church. We always want to go one particular way all the time and think that's the black and white view of how things need to operate. If we have multiple platforms, look how many multiple people that can come to Christ. Everybody's not an in-person person. That's just the nature of the beast. But you have this virtual platform going on at the same time to grab. That's the Great Commission, to grab those people, because in this day and time, like Esther said, technology, in person is not the way to get them. We have a short span of people to reach out to the people. Let's do every mode necessary, what it takes. If that means that I may have inflatables and pump it up for in person for the kids to come in for that one, using COVID safety precautions, and then do something wild and crazy for virtual at the same time. If I lose that person to virtual, so what? I still have them here getting the gospel, because ultimately it's about the gospel and it's not about our feelings about it in a building. And I think that's what we miss as leaders, is that we miss the mark on thinking they have to do it this one way. God wants us out of the box. This reset is about being out of the box. God's word doesn't change, but his methods may change. And so we have to think as children's people, leaders outside. Yes, Esther said it. We're competing with everybody. Then let's go in their background. I mean, in their backyard, and let's go get our kids and our people the way they get them. And let's stop looking at it the same traditional way. That's what I did for this reset. I said, let's go out of the box on everything, from Awana to everything. Let's change everything around. Let's redo. Let's go at the kids where they are and the parents where they are. If it's digital, let's go digital. If it's in person, let's go in person. Let's use every means necessary, because children's ministry and children working with children is a part of a leg. 3 points. We have adult ministry, we have youth ministry and children. If the children's ministry on the leg is broken, then the chair does not stand. And so we have to do whatever it takes to get it. And it's not a gimmick, it's not that, but it's like my pastor said, Dr. Evans, if I put a little chocolate over this broccoli, then I may get you to eat it. And so I'm going to do what it takes to do that. And so I hate to have to jump in there, but I see in the chat, people are feeling, oh my God, we have to move that spirit of, oh my God, out of the way. Go for it. I'm speaking to the people. Go for it. Don't let fear stop you from doing what it takes to go get these kids. We don't have enough volunteers. That's fear. We don't have enough leadership on our side. That's fear. Let's come against that of fear and say, we're going to go and make disciples of our kids and whatever it takes to do it. And so Matt won't have to stay up all night worrying about this. And so we need to go after those kids and say, this is what we did. And I say this is the mountain I'm willing to die on. And if that
Amen to
means
that.
going after everything to do it, that's what I'm going to do. I'm sorry. Again, I'm a little
No,
passionate
don't,
about my
Cynthia,
kids.
Like,
do
I
not
just,
apologize. You can't stop. Sam, jump in.
I just want to say something. Okay, so I think so about like what you're saying, I think there is definitely excellence is definitely something that we strive for in kids ministry for sure. Absolutely. I mean, I think we do the best we can do with what God has given us. You know what I'm saying? One of the things I get concerned about and I've written about it oftentimes is that when you go to a conference, right? And we paint this picture of excellence, is that sometimes in most churches in America are small. And so they have this idea that they're like, well, we can't do that. So they almost feel discouraged. And here's where I would say, like, we should strive to do that. But thank God that that it's not about information, it's about incarnation. It's God with us. And this is what we have that Disney doesn't have, is that we can show up on the front door of our kids, of the kids in our kids ministry, and give them and drop off a present for them on their front page. Disney can't do that. They can send them something in the mail. They can send them little wristbands.
Exactly.
But we can show up in person and we can
Yes.
say, listen, here's the thing: is God loves you. And this is the thing about the whole digital versus brick and mortar, right? It isn't. This is what I think is so important for us, is this has allowed us to clarify, to have this discipleship forming conversations, to clarify, what does the church look like? What should the church be? Who is the church? What does the church look like? What does God require from us? The Great Commission is more than just good information. It's more than just saying something. It is the gospel, but it's how do we exemplify that to a watching world that is lost their mind in terms of fear and in terms of sadness, in terms of sorrow, in terms of all the things that we've seen this last year have been so overwhelming. This is where we show up and we say, this is the reality. This is where Disney can't help us. This is where Disney can't help our kids. Disney can pacify our kids for a moment and numb them from their pain temporarily. But this is where we come in and say, here's us being the church. Here's us loving you in such a way that we point you to Jesus over and over and over again, because he is our hope. He is our joy. He is our life. He is everything to us. And when we do that, Cynthia, like I love what you're saying, that is what this does for our kids, is that it allows them to not just hear the gospel from us, which we've been doing, but allows us to show them what does a gospel formed life look like. It looks like someone who sacrificially runs. I love what Martin Luther, he was talking about, how do you deal with pandemics? Because he went through a pandemic of his own. And I love what he said. He said, I can't say exactly, I don't remember exactly the quote, but he says basically, use wisdom. He's like, don't be stupid. Don't be stupid. Wash your hands. Don't be an idiot. You know what I'm saying? But he said this. He goes, when someone is in pain, when someone needs your help, you don't run away from them. You run to them. Right. Yep. And I think, to me, that is like the perfect balance for us in this situation. This is how we can show the love of Christ to people, is by not being stupid, but also by not being selfish and running to people who need us most. And that's the kids and the families that God's placed within our care by his providence.
Sam, I love that you said, by not being stupid. I mean, it sounds crazy. I mean, it's so true. I mean, everything that you're saying, I think part of what we need to make sure that we're doing, that a lot of us may not even know how to do as much, we have to make sure that we're doing our homework. And that was something that I learned in this season. One of the biggest complaints when we had to move kind of to a virtual platform, everybody went to Zoom. Zoom was like the number one, we're going to Zoom. But guess what? Everybody's starting to get zoomed out. Some places it may still be working. Other places, it may not. But that's when we, have to do our homework, and just for some practical things. And I know some of you are watching and you're like, man, yeah, I'm doing Zoom and I'm starting to get bored. There are so many different outlets. I know I just discovered Ecamm Live, which is something that interacts with Zoom and makes your Zoom come alive in ways that you couldn't do if you just use Zoom, but they both connect. So finding ways to make it super fun, crowd control games, incorporating things like that into what you do to make it fun, and not just for kids, but for grownups as well. I am a firm believer that whether you are in person or whether you are online, there are still ways to go forth with the spirit of excellence, because God wants us, because we love him so much, because the message that we carry is so powerful and is so important. That's why it's so important that we are constantly doing our homework on how to make things as best as they can, because like Sam and Cynthia are saying, the whole purpose is to build his kingdom for the glory of God. So just super agree with what everyone's saying. Yes, I'm reading the chat box at the same time, and I'll put some of those things in that I know I've used to just really just make things, we're in children's ministry, right? To make things, more colorful and to just kind of waken it up a little bit.
Because, what Esther is saying is that our Zoom, I have 5 Zooms going on at the same time on any given Sunday and Wednesday of each age group. And each age group have their own backgrounds to identify. They flip the screens of the backgrounds as they go to different segments. It's purposely by design for our church ministry is that the parent is required to be on the Zoom. And the reason why the parent is required is if we're saying that, like Sam said, the old philosophy is that, the parent is the, primary spiritual giver of spirituality for their kids, then we'll move a little bit into that realm and that we're co-laboring with them. But the parents have to run around the room with the kids. The parents have to do the lesson with the kids on the Zoom. It is purposely by design. Now you have parents who typically in the past just dropped their kids off. Think about it in the past, because, they thought we were babysitters. Let's just be honest. The parents thought we were the babysitters and just dropped their kids. Now they're engaged now they see what took place with their kids. Now I have a potential new volunteer for in person. See, now I can go to that parent because they've been a part of this Zoom and says, are you interested, not just taking over the class, but maybe just helping out? This is ways how you recruit new volunteers instead of saying, I can't find new people. Your new people may be a part of your Zoom already. And so this is something that they didn't know that they could do, but they learned it through COVID in this period of time. So again, I go back to training. This is another way you're training your parents. Our newsletters that go out weekly, also our text messages that go out every week. And you said, well, I'm a smaller church, I can't do that. Like Sam said, you can get your list, do like we did by zip codes. And we just went to the doorbell, ding dong, social distancing in the back, dropped off a care packet, gave them some information and say, hi, I want to see you Sunday. That's simple. They love to see you. Take a photo, picture, put it on your Facebook page. Like Esther says, social media and technology. You can go back to old school and say, hey, I just want to check on you. Phone call, send a card in the mail with a stamp. Ooh, some people don't know what that is. A stamp. A stamp. And those things of a personal touch. Now you remembered every birthday because you may show it up. We did. Because we're larger and we can able to do this, but smaller churches can do this. We divided it by zip codes.
Right.
Some of the volunteers took this zip code, and that's what their whole goal was, just to love on those kids in that area around their neighborhood. Some people took just the sub neighborhood and they just went to those doors and loved on those kids. We made discipleship, not of our kids, just our kids, but of our parents and of our volunteers, and it trickled down. So I'm saying, when I keep saying going out of the box, quit looking at ministry as it was prior to. Let's look out of the box. And again, I rung on a doorbell one day. A parent had a child. He was zoomed out, having a fit. I sat in the yard with this child for 2 hours and we played checkers, because not the parent told me that, is that I was making my runs through the neighborhood of the kids I was checking on and found out that I didn't know that this child had autism, but they were in my ministry for years. I say this is how we need to start learning our personal touch with our parents.
Yeah.
And so maybe this is another opportunity to start learning our kids and learning who they are. And so we can disciple, because you can't disciple kids who don't know you or familiar with you or want to be a part of you. And so it's like Sam said, let's go back old school on some of this. We're doing new school a lot, but let's go back to some old school. And we missed that. We really had. And
I
this
think, I
year-
think Cynthia, I think too, hey, you brought me on here. I'm a new school person too.
but I do both.
I mean, I
I
think
do
that,
both.
finding, we still have to discover, completely. And I know Sam had mentioned it earlier. I think it's so true. And Cynthia, same thing on discipling parents. I think that that's something that we have learned in the season. And I'm not saying that because I am like a children's ministry guru and expert. I'm saying that because I'm a parent. And when everything shut down, I was like, who's going to teach these kids? And I'm in children's ministry. I'm saying this about my own kids, like, oh my goodness. And I think we've discovered, man, we kind of missed the boat a little bit when it came to truly discipling parents and equipping them with what they need. But in order to do that, we have to know where the parents are. Every church is not created the same. This is why it's so important to understand the culture of your church and to understand where your parents are. For some of these ministries, these parents are on social media, and for them to feel cared about, you have to literally comment on, excuse me, I need you to comment on my son's soccer game. Okay. And that makes them feel like $1 million, and yes, that's new school, but that's something that may reach somebody over here. So I think that we need to make sure, in addition to showing up, at their doorsteps, that was definitely something that we did. In addition, to praying and doing everything that we can and making phone calls, we also need to meet them, where they are, and make sure that we're constantly engaging, whether you have to do a poll to see what do they need, what do your parents in your ministry need in this season? What are they struggling with? Are they struggling financially? So many people have lost their jobs in this season. Maybe that's a need that they have. What can we produce? What can we get together to meet them at their deepest need in this season? This is what I believe it is to partner with parents.
I love that. And I love everything that you guys have been taking. We've been talking about reach. We've been talking about discipling and what that can look like in this moment. But I want to shift the conversation a bit to Matt, actually, something that you brought up earlier when it comes to mobilizing volunteers. I'm mindful of the ways in which this conversation could feel really heavy for some folks because we're talking about all these different considerations. But when you look at a volunteer base, Matt, what should those on this call be thinking about right now? What should it look like to be engaging with this group? You said so that they can come back in the fall, but really so that people can get on this mission now. What does that look like?
Ross, I'm going to answer your question, but before I do, I want to acknowledge all the introverts out there who are, would you guys please take a breath? So we're going to collective together. We're going to just take a breath. Ready?
Good, Matt.
All right, so we're taking a breath. We're catching our breath. So Ross, I've been taking notes here. All right, you know how I am. You know how I think. So I've got two. So speaking of going analog and sending letters and showing up on doorsteps, I'm going to go analog, and I've got two paper visuals here. Here's the first one. This is a summary of what I've heard us saying up to this point. So we, as children's ministry leaders and volunteers and parents, we've got, our foundation has to be abiding in Christ. John chapter 15, we have to abide in the vine. We've got to bend our hearts toward God's, connect with him, get time in the word, get time to think and pray and to worship him. That's our foundation, right? Yeah. But I love what Cynthia said. This has been a great time to reset. We've heard some of these resetting ideas. I heard Sam say earlier, what's your goal and your vision? Let's set our metrics to that goal and vision. I've heard ideas about, we've got to diversify. We've got to have ways to connect virtually. We've got ways to connect in person, right? So this is a time of resetting so that we can rebuild. So I think that's kind of a summary of what I've heard us saying to this point. Now to my other visual that I pre-prepared. So wow. There's kind of three, I've heard three in my mind in conversations we've been having in recent months, I've heard 3 word pairings as it relates to this volunteer thing. So let's start from the top. The first one is kids and objectives. We all have key objectives in our ministry, right? Like you have an objective. You want to help kids come to know Jesus and to be saved and to take steps closer to him weekly as disciples, engaging the scripture, memorizing the Bible, having faith experiences to live out their faith and to grow closer to Jesus. So those are our key objectives. We want to see kids reach those objectives of getting closer to Jesus as disciples. And secondly, parents have these desired outcomes for their kids. Like, parents have a vision of their kids' future. They want to see their kids flourishing in their faith. They want to see their kids following Jesus for a lifetime and living on mission for him. And therefore, we have this team, this children's ministry team, this child disciple making team, this team, some of them are paid staff, some of them are volunteers perhaps, and they're helping us steward, manage, and lead this ministry to make all of this happen. But going back to that thought earlier on, now is the time to mobilize this group of volunteers, based on that reset vision to rebuild for the future. So I think there's three things we need to be doing right now to get these volunteers in our ministry re-engaged for the fall. So here are the three things that I think that we need to be doing now in March and April to get ready for the fall. The first one is we've got to establish our guiding coalition. Depending on your context, that may be 3 people, that may be 5, 7, 12, 15. I don't know how many people it is based on your church and the size of your team. Who is your guiding coalition? This group of key people around you that's going to help re-engage this faith. These are your people who are going to pray with you. They're going to get down on their knees. They're going to faithfully be with you to help get your team re-engaged. So establish your guiding coalition. The second thing is that team has to be ready to inspire. We've got to lift the eyes of our people. We've got to cast vision. We've got to cast vision around the objectives and the outcomes and the vision that we all see for the future of our children who are going to be the future of the church, engaging the culture and leading the church. So we've got to build that guiding coalition. And that guiding coalition has to help us inspire our people. And then thirdly, equip them with the necessary things they need to get ready to be fully re-engaged for this fall. So establish your guiding coalition, inspire them with that grand vision for the children in your church and for their future to know, love, and serve Jesus. And thirdly, let's equip those volunteers with everything they need to get ready for this fall. I think that's what we need to be doing in March and April.
That is so good, man. I mean, I think one of the things that I've heard a lot, is, you're so right. How do we get, for so many of us, a lot of our volunteers may have left, they were on a break, and they walked away. And I think that it's so important to make sure that they know that we care. They don't care. They're not concerned about what we need from them until they know that we care. So that coalition is going to be so important in letting them know, exactly where they are. Listen, we care. So I love it. I love it.
It's a good word, Matt. Sam, I think some of what Matt's speaking to also leans into what we need to let go of, right? Wasn't really working before COVID and we were just kind of turning our wheels on. But how does that, you as a church leader, you've had to live out what Matt's talking about very practically. What are some things we need to let go on, and especially when it comes to relating to volunteers?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because part of the resetting of our ministries, a part of the thing is part of the, sometimes as things just get added on over time and you just do them out of tradition. You just do them because that's what we've always done. And you're the person who's, you hate that when someone says that, when you walk into with fresh eyes and you say, well, this is what we've always done. But someone's leading this is what we've always done, right? And so what COVID has done is allowed us to look at our ministries like the new person walking in. And when we walked in, we had, I didn't know what to expect when we opened. We opened in June. I knew what to expect this first Sunday. And we had, we were expecting maybe 30%, 40%, 50% maybe. We had 10% kids, 10%. 10% of the kids that we had came back, and it was obviously early, and we've grown since then, and then we've shrunk back because we've had some outbreaks and some issues that were difficult. But what we had to learn is, okay, what is the most important things? What number one, what do we measure, right? What are we trying to build? Right? You have to start with, what are you trying to build? What does a disciple look like in the context of your church? right? And then what you have to say is, okay, how as a kids minister, how can I at the end of my job, right? The end of my job is not to have a good kids minister is not to have kids that don't want to leave, right? That because they love you so much. If you're doing your job as a kids pastor, the youth ministry should be thriving, right? If you're doing your job as a youth pastor, right, your church should have young people in it on the weekends that are making the church, that are pushing the church forward in terms of vision, values, energy, right? All around this idea of these are disciples that are discipling other people, that are pushing the church forward. And so what we have to do is look at is you have to be more, especially in this time when volunteers are at a premium. You have to say, is this event helping us to accomplish the purpose of our church of discipling kids and discipling parents and discipling families? Is it yes or no? And if the answer is no, then you have to either come up with like an alternative to that, or you have to just let it go. And you have to come down to what is the core things that are most valuable. Because there's some things that we do just because we like to do them, you know what I mean? Just because they're fun, and nothing wrong with that. But the reality should be is okay, what is our core principles? What is the thing that we're here for? And we're not here, like we want our kids ministry to be fun, right? We want our kids ministry to be fun, but we want more than anything is we want our kids to love and to trust and to treasure Christ. We want them to walk away from our kids ministry one day when they go into youth ministry, when they move on. We want them to walk away knowing this, that Jesus is enough, that Jesus is beautiful, Jesus is everything. And if they do that, then we've succeeded. So what we have to say is okay, is this event that we're doing, like, does VBS allow that to happen? And for us, it does. For us, VBS is not just when we first did VBS. When I first started, it was like just a kids ministry event that we did, and it was more of like an outreach thing. And honestly, it didn't really reach a lot of people. For us, it didn't. So we stopped doing it, and then we rebooted it in terms of like, we're going to use this as a concentrated time to disciple our kids. And so we wrote a curriculum around the Heidelberg Catechism that helps our kids understand this is what the church has believed, will always believe, and this is what we believe. This is what, if you believe these things, like the Apostles' Creed, those types of things, this is what makes you a Christian. It's not how you feel that particular morning. It's, do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God? Do you believe in what Christ has done for you? You know, and so I think for us, that is something that we hang on to. We're doing VBS full bore this year because we believe that kids need each other, kids need a relationship, but most of all, kids need a relationship with Jesus. So there's certain things we're letting go. We're just not, there's certain outreach things that we used to do, or there's certain events that we planned, and we do like a big Christmas thing in the winter. We do like a big thing for our own kids. We just didn't do it because we didn't want to, the hallways, we wanted to respect distance, and we wanted to try to be safe for families, but we don't want to let go we don't want to, out of fear, compromise the discipleship of kids. But we also want to be mindful and keep people safe, and to be wise, and to honor the governments that God's placed in our lives. And living in New York is not easy. You know, there's a lot of restrictions that have been difficult to manage and to walk through. And so it's knowing what to let go, and the only way to know what to let go, Ross, is to know what is most valuable. Like,
Yeah.
what is valuable? What can I never let go of? Because when you know what you can never let go of, then it allows you to say, okay, these things aren't as important. We can come back and, you know, maybe in a couple months, maybe in a couple of years, or maybe never, because this is what matters more than anything else. And when I was younger, when I was younger in kids ministry, that was the biggest problem for me. Was every Sunday I found my worth by whether kids had fun or not, or whether they liked coming to church or not. And I made that the thrust of my ministry. And I think I missed. They loved me, but they didn't love Jesus necessarily, right? So I don't want kids to like me and not love Jesus. And so if when it comes down to it, I want kids that through me, through the people that we lead, see Jesus as infinitely more precious, infinitely more valuable than anything that this world has to offer. That the loves of this world pale in comparison to the love of God for them in Christ. And that comes from people that know what's most important. That comes from people holding on to the values, to the historic faith handed to us. And when we don't do that, when we fail to hold on to the historic faith handed to us, what happens is we're blown by the winds of culture. that says, okay, what do kids need now today? Which is important. We want to make sure that we can communicate to them in a way they can understand. But what do we communicate? What has always been true. What has always been true. And that's the gospel of Jesus Christ in a way that kids can not only hear and see, but they can see it, they can absorb it, and they can take it with them to their contexts.
Yeah, that's good, Sam. I want to address a couple of housekeeping items that have come up in the chat, and we're going to jump to some of your questions in a second. So first of all, thank you all so much for the chat engagement. I haven't been able to read it, but the amount of times that my screen is going like this while everyone's talking tells me that it's a great community over there. So thank you for that. I want to let you know that from the Awana side, we're going to put out answers to some of the questions that we're not going to be able to get to in the form of a blog. And yeah, that some of you have asked, yes, the recording of this will be available after the event. So do make sure, even though this event's already happened, if you just got here, if you didn't go through the registration process, make sure you're registered with us so that we can get that information to you. And I will also say, make sure that you are following everything Esther and Sam and Cynthia and Matt are doing so that, we can keep this conversation going. The last thing any of us want is for this conversation to end here. But Matt, I want to bring this all the way down to the cookies on the bottom shelf, as you like to say. You talked about equipping this volunteer base in this moment like this. Someone's walking away from this event. What does that look like for them? What is the first thing that they should be doing? Or what is the next thing that they should really be taking back to their team based off the conversation that we're talking about with this event for volunteers?
So one of the first things a leader does is defines reality. And another thing that a leader does is to give hope. And there's three more things I'd love to talk about. We're going to focus on those too. So that guiding coalition has to define reality among the people, meaning where, if you're living in California, you might have a different context than in Middle Tennessee, where I'm at here in the Nashville area. So depending on where a church is at in this whole, thing that's been the COVID world, you really need to know where your people are. So defining reality is getting a feel for what has this season been like? So if my volunteer base is 12 people or 50 people or 200 people, I've got to know kind of the temperature, the kind of where the wind is blowing with my people. So defining reality is super important, emotionally, spiritually, physically. Where are my people at? So that's one of the first things I would want my guiding coalition to help me do. And based on that, so define reality and give hope. Secondly, I've got to lift their eyes and I've got to give hope and say, we're here. We want to be here. Can you be a part of helping this church because of the gospel, because we want to make disciples? Can you help us get here to get ready by that time? And so based on what I'm learning by asking questions and my guiding coalition helping me define reality, that's going to help me to understand what my key equipping needs to be. If my people need help with X, then I need to have a plan to be able to come alongside of them and help meet that need. So I think a lot of it, Ross, is the basic skills of listening, using empathy, asking questions, collecting that information, and based on that, building a custom plan for my church on how to get from here to there. And then I would say, beyond that, I would just say, pay attention to what other churches are doing. Listening, joining the different key Facebook groups to really listen to what other churches are learning along that way. But I've got to have a custom pathway for my church, but then there's probably a common pathway for what other churches are learning as well. That's where my mind would be if I was a local church leader.
That's good, Matt. I want to make sure people have, their marching orders, if nothing else, from this event. But I hope that what everyone who's been on this call has heard is the heart of the four panelists that we've been talking to probably sounds a lot like your hearts, right? This community is so self-sacrificial and so giving, and some of the questions that have come in have reflected that. So I'll just throw this out. We're probably going to have time for one or two. Before I do want to correct myself. Rather than registering for an event in the past, I've been told that that's not a thing, which is why I don't run our IT department. So do make sure that you email partnercare@awana.org if there's anything from this event that you haven't seen, or just make sure you're following Awana social media channels, because we'll make sure to put a lot of the content out there as well. But I want to dive into some of these questions. So again, that's partnercare@awana.org. One of the questions that came in that I think is a good sort of tension that that everyone has described is the difference between childcare needs and discipleship needs, right? Because I think ministries for a long time. Cynthia, you spoke about this directly, where some parents view this community as babysitters, but both relate to children's ministry of things like making sure that your kid is on a Zoom and is able to be reached in this virtual environment, but they have totally different goals and purposes. So as we look forward, particularly in terms of equipping volunteers, what does it look like to do more than just childcare, even with a community that may not be looking to you to do anything other than just keep their kid busy? What does that look like? Cynthia, I would love to hear you speak a little bit to that directly about that tension, because I think a lot of people feel that.
Well, for us, we had to change the language. And so prior to, it was always, we had children's ministry. And if we had an event, it was called childcare. So we changed the language to children's ministry. So we wanted to change the language, reset the mindset of how we viewed our children's ministry department. And so we totally took childcare out of everything, literature, anything that we had. And then for our staff and volunteers, we purposely by design gave them and equipped them with a curriculum to teach, even if it was an event that quote unquote might have been childcare, but we turned the language into children's ministry. And so we didn't separate the two, but in the mindset is that we constantly did everything from curriculum to how you minister to disciple. Even if it was an event where the church is having something and then we're providing childcare for that, quote unquote, we said it was children's ministry. We don't offer childcare. We do offer children's ministry here, and that your child will be taught these things, and we will provide you the tools, parents, to continue on after this event or what's going on. I think oftentimes it's about language. Many times we say childcare ourselves. We're in something, and we have to set the narrative, and we have to set the scope of what we're doing. Parents will only go according to what you said. And so if you are saying that you're having childcare for a group meeting, that's what you're going to have. But if you're saying you're having children's ministry in your event, and that they're going to be taught, love and the discipleship and Christ, then parents have another understanding is that they're not dropping their child off to a babysitting service, but their child is getting enriched just as they're getting enriched in whatever event they're going to be a part of. And so for me, I recommend change the language, the mindset. You, not because your parents can't do that, but you. And go in and this is ministry. This is what we do. We're ministering the gospel. We're teaching our kids. We're giving them the foundation, and we're giving them the tools they need to go further. And if you go in with that mindset, then it changes the dynamic of babysitting. And like I said, every time a parent says, "Hi, I'm new," or somebody come in and says, "What is your child? I know you have childcare. I said, we don't offer childcare, but we do offer children's ministry." And
That's
so
good,
it explains.
Cynthia.
So it's the mindset, shaping the mindset.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I want to do one more question from the chat, just because there've been so many great questions that have come through. I do also want to acknowledge that we are already over time, but we are nowhere near done yet. So I just thank you all for your grace in that regard. But Esther or Sam, I would love to have you guys jump in here. So this was a question that came in from Amy that was focusing on parent discipleship. I would imagine that this could just kind of be brought into just both bringing in the home of, I think Amy, so I'm just going to read it verbatim, which she said, what do you recommend for parent discipleship? I know this is a need in our church, but I don't know the best way to address it. Amy acknowledges that, there's in-person events that are hard to get people to come to. There's live stream events it's hard to get people to log on to. She's asking, should she consider recordings about discipling the family? What's the success rate, or what are other ideas? And they're a church of about 600, if that helps. We're going to land there before we move on, but just would love to hear Esther and Sam speak to that.
I think one thing, just real quick, I'll say, and I'll ask Esther go real quick, for us is we try to push family worship, right? Jonathan Edwards, he famously said that every home should be like a little church. And so I think the best way to develop parents is to help them to understand, what does family worship look like? And for us, we say that is reading a passage of scripture, explaining it to the best of your abilities, singing a hymn together, and prayer. And so it should be 10 minutes. And we try to encourage them to do that once to, 4 times a week, as a way for them to together saying, we're forming our kids' spiritual foundation and their biblical imagination. Through that is the best way for us. We also do catechism. We use the New City Catechism, and that there's tools for parents at home to do that as well. So those are some of the things that we do, but I think it's giving them tools, and it's believing in them and answering questions for them. Whenever parents have questions about theology or whatever, I generally answer the question for them and point them to an age-appropriate systematic theology book for their kids so they can answer the next question that their kids have. So that's
good, Sam. Esther, what about you?
I think knowing what your parents need, we've talked about that before, finding out in particular in your setting what your parents need. But, as I was reading the chat box, I think it was Gary, his name is Gary, and he said vision casting. And I love that he said that. I think vision casting is so important when it comes to reaching the next generation. It is a structured process that we cannot skip unless you're going to get caught up in the, what can we do? Maybe we'll do this. Let's try this. But coming up with a vision and then breaking that down into smaller goals of what are we going to do this month in order to reach our parents in our cultural context? What are we going to do this month? I think that is so important. I think so many of us miss the boat when it comes to really sitting down. And I'm not talking about a planning meeting on what are all the events we're going to do? Where are the fire exits? So everyone knows how to get out. I am talking about a vision casting meeting of what are we going to do in order to create an environment, in order to change the culture. People think that this is babysitting. What can we proactively do to change the culture? What can we proactively do to reach our parents? This is what we do in a structural format in order to truly create that change and to be able to follow what we're doing. So just super excited and pumped, and completely agree with everything Cynthia and Sam said. I think Gary, I love the chat box because it's so many other people bringing in so much value to the conversation. I was just sitting there reading it like, yes, Gary, there it is.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Esther. It's been great to be with you all. That's a great place to land. Just thanking all of you who have been in the chat. Panelists, thank you all so much for your time and your wisdom. I do want to say, though, don't go anywhere. I know we're over time, but this is the part where I would highly encourage you to stick around for just a little bit longer. Like I said, the last thing any of us would want is for this conversation to end here. So bring what was talked about today back to your teams. Highly, highly encourage you to share not only with your teams, but with your broader communities, this conversation around discipleship. And really, that's what we here at Awana are all about. We're all in this together with you. And that's why I'm so excited to make sure you know about the Child Discipleship Forum. If I'm the first person to tell you about that, first of all, where you been? But second of all, we're going to play a quick video here, and then Melanie's going to come back and have a quick conversation with Matt all about the Child Discipleship Forum. I'm really excited to gather with all of you in Nashville on September 16th and 17th. We would love for you to join us. So check out this video. Thanks, everybody.
Our kids don't need another message to be good in the midst of a world as broken and the brokenness to which they're exposed. They need the gospel, and they need a spiritual foundation.
Some people are more comfortable with old problems than new solutions. Some people are more comfortable saying to a generation, you can just die without God.
Children are the littlest and the least, and then they become the lost. They're voiceless. And because they are voiceless, it's easy to overlook them.
The world sees our children as people to be molded into their image.
They want something that's real. They want something that they can believe in. And so they're capable of a lot more than oftentimes we as church leaders kind of think they can handle.
They have all the potential in the world. Because I know if I can help them imagine that future, that's the first step to them walking into it.
It's been said, in every childhood, there is one moment when the door opens and lets the future in.
Okay, so Matt, we are sharing with people that the Child Discipleship Forum is a place where we have saved them a seat. So my question for you that I'd love for you to unpack is, what is unique about the Child Discipleship Forum, and what would benefit someone to register and then also bring their team to this?
So this morning I spoke to a group of 80 high school students from a local Christian school, and everyone in the room was born between the year 2003 and 2006. And so we were talking about the significance of this year, 2007. You know the significance behind that year? I know you do, Melanie. You're like a culture expert. But 2007 is the year that not only the iPhone was invented, but Twitter had released in 2006, and also in the 2007 timeframe, Facebook became available for anyone that has an email address. So between the digital interstate system and now these platforms for communication, today's kids have grown up in a world where any message and every message can be accessible at a moment's notice. And so today's children are living in a very different world. So when we meet with children's ministry leaders like the ones who are on this meeting today, we're hearing regularly the question asked, are we adequately preparing today's kids to thrive in the year 2050 in their faith? Are they adequately prepared to engage the culture and to lead the church? So this child discipleship is important no matter the culture, whether it's a majority Christian culture or whether Christians are living on the margins. It doesn't really matter. Child discipleship is always important. But in a world where Christianity is really more, perhaps less mainstream and more on the margins, we have to be preparing our kids, discipling them, and helping them to be comfortable and thrive in a culture that may not necessarily be for them in the ways of Jesus. That's what the Child Discipleship Forum is about, is to bring the body of Christ together to have conversations about cultural analysis, local church practice, and child advocacy. I think we heard all of that today. So if you've enjoyed this, I think you're really going to enjoy the Child Discipleship Forum, and we hope you'll come be a part of it.
Oh, I totally agree. And Lorianne, I love that you just threw in the chat. Nashville's a little far from Ontario. And I just want to let you know that there is going to be both a digital experience for the forum, and there's also going to be an in-person experience in Nashville. And so for those that are local and are like, hey, we could do a road trip, or we could gather our team and we could make Nashville happen, great. We would love to see you there. But we also recognize that this conversation can't be limited to just the in-person space for a number of reasons. One, location, two, COVID, and all the things that we'll be doing with that. So if you and your team would find this to be valuable, you are more, we have a space for you. Register for that online ticket and come and gather your team and use this as an opportunity, really a catalyst to continue walking into saying, for the Church of 2050, what do we need to do? What does this look like, and how do we disciple them? So a price break is coming up just tomorrow, friends. So the cheapest you're going to get this ticket is today and tomorrow. So if you haven't registered, do that now.
It's actually Thursday. You can register through Thursday, midnight Central Time.
Guys, that's what it's like to work for Awana. It's all of a sudden you realize there's something, and then there's just a gift that comes. You guys just got an extra day of a price break. All right. So until Thursday, you guys get those tickets. And then just know that if you want more information, you can check out childdiscipleshipforum.com. And we'll go ahead and throw that in the chat for you. Any questions that you have, please reach out to us. We would love to get those answered for you. But most of all, friends, I just want to say thank you for being here today. What we just heard was exactly what God had planned for this conversation to be, and you were supposed to be here to add in through this chat conversation. So thank you for being here. And I just also want to thank Ross for being such an incredible host. If you haven't ever listened to the Resilient Disciples podcast, you should go to your favorite platform for podcasts and you should subscribe today, because conversations like this happen every single week. So check those out. Friends, to close us out, I'm just going to pray over us. And I just want to specifically pray a blessing over you as you move into this new season of discipleship and look to mobilize and empower those volunteers. Let's go ahead and pray. Father, those that were here today, you had brought to have this critical conversation, and we're grateful for the ways that they are intentionally speaking into the context of their communities to bring your kingdom to play here. God, we are so grateful for your calling, and we're so grateful for the way that you give us what we need to make your name known and to give you glory. So Father, I want to bless everyone who is on this call today with your wisdom and with your strength and with your faith. God, that we have the faith to knock out the fears that are standing as barriers between us and what it looks like to re-engage in child discipleship in thoughtful and intentional ways. God, we are so grateful for your love, and may this week bring us closer to you in a way that we haven't been before. In Jesus' name, amen. Friends, have a great week, and we'll see you next time.